Okay, so this one's going to be pretty long. I'm going to try to break it up into 30-minute pieces. So here we go. So we covered we covered Eastern Europe, all right, and how they were different. And now we're going to cover Western Europe. Well, these guys are going to be different. Eastern Europe was a certain way. These guys are very different from that way. Over there we've got centralized governments. We talked about the theme system. Over here we're going to have something that we've seen before. If you guys remember the type of government that the Shang dynasty had and the Zhao dynasty had in China, we're going to revisit that. Anybody remember what that was called? Feudalism. That's right. Now if you remember feudalism, it's decentralized. You have to have loyal nobles. If the nobles aren't loyal, you know that bad things could happen. So the post-classical age in Western Europe, or the Middle Ages, the medieval times, basically spanned from about 400 to 1400. I know this one says 500 to 1500. I haven't updated this. This is kind of old. So about 1,000 years of the Dark Ages, right? This is after the fall of the Roman Empire, and this is going to be nothing like the Roman Empire. If you remember the Roman Empire, we had great huge cities with great engineering, awesome buildings, things like that. That doesn't happen anymore. Like I said, in Rome, the dome was something that was used a lot in architecture. People don't know how to make domes anymore in Western Europe, right? So we're going to go about 1,000 years without that kind of architecture. These guys are living a little, when you think Western Europe during this time period, it's okay to think of these huts that are made with maybe mud bricks and have straw, roofing. It's pretty, poor. They don't have a whole lot. So we're going to cover a couple of kings, not a whole lot, but we are going to talk about these Germanic people, the Germanic tribes that invaded Rome. Well, they're now in charge. There is no Rome. There is no central Roman government. So now we have these Germanic kings, these feudal lords. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to control as much land as they can with the help of their aristocratic buddies. Now, remember, the Germanic tribes, they didn't know much. The reason that they came to Rome was they were looking for food. They were looking for anything because they had very little. These guys can't read. They can't write. They're pretty far back as far as at this point modern civilization goes. So one of the more important ones that we're going to focus on is the Franks. All right, the Franks are going to be one of the most powerful Germanic tribes in the area. The Angles and Saxons, they're pretty important too because they're the ones that establish basically where England is today. So those of you familiar with the term Anglo-Saxon, that's where it comes from. And Anglo, is a term that is used. That's where it comes from. So, like it says, they're organized around tribes with loyalty to the king. And so like it says, the warrior aristocracy, the nobles, those assist the king. It's feudalism, like we said. They're supposed to do whatever they can to help the king, and in return the king gives them land to watch over. And remember, in feudalism, you're trading loyalty for land, right? Those nobles have to protect the land and make the land productive. So another big difference that we see, instead of Rome, the city of Rome being the center of everything, it's like it says here, the center of Rome shifted from Italy to northern areas. So now we're talking places like Germany, and we're talking places like France and England. Those become much more important areas, not like before when Rome just kind of used those places for agriculture and trade. Now these are the dominant spots. I already said a little bit about the Germanic tribes and how they can read, they can write. That's why we got the little dunce boy over here. Poor little dunce boy with his dunce cap. They don't let you do that anymore in school because that would be bullying, right? Public humiliation. But that's what they used to do. Kids that didn't do their homework and would act up in class. Maybe we should bring it back. Nah, I'm just kidding. everybody would want to sit in the front with that cool hat, right? So, Latin. One of the things that we started to see, and this was kind of a big deal in the last chapter, we talked about the vernacular. You guys remember what the word vernacular means, the everyday language. Well, the vernacular is changing, right? Latin, which was the dominant language in Rome, it was the official language, is now changing. Now we have French and Spanish and Italian. These are what we call Romance languages, not because, you know, if you can speak them, you can like woo your woman or your man. You know, it's all romantico. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking romance because of Rome, because of Latin. They derive from Latin. So, remember, we talked about this is a huge deal because these guys are speaking different languages now, but still the church operates in Latin. The Bible is written in Latin. Liturgy is in Latin. So, I mean, what are these people learning in church if they don't know Latin? Possibly nothing. So this is Europe up until the 600s. All right. So these are the kingdoms of the Germanic tribes. Over here, of course, we have the Byzantine Empire. But over here, like I said, you're going to have Gaul, which is France. All right. Spain is under the control of the Visigoths. But eventually, by the year 700, we know what happens to Spain. They get taken over by the Muslims. So this is, you know, this is what's happening. This is what Europe looks like at the time. Just kind of, you're going to have tons of different kingdoms in this area. All right, so let's begin with the Franks, okay? Because the Franks, like I said, they're a big deal. The Franks are going to be the biggest Germanic and strongest Germanic kingdom that settles in the area. And it all starts with this guy named Clovis. Clovis is a big deal. Clovis does something that's going to change European history forever. I mean, all of what's going to happen in Western Europe is going to be part of what he did. It's going to be influenced by what he did. See, Clovis... he was leading his Germanic tribes to get rid of the last bits of Roman authority. And see, he went into battle, and he didn't know if he was going to win, so he prayed. He prayed to the Christian God, and guess what happened? He won. So what he did is he converted to Christianity. But not only did he convert to Christianity, this is obviously not painted during the time period because back then they couldn't paint like this, but this is a later painting depicting what happened with Clovis. He converted and he had all his men convert. So, this is going to begin something that's very, very important in Western Europe. These kings start aligning themselves with the church. We see this saying right here in Latin, "In hoc signet vince," in this sign conquer. What is the sign that they are conquering in now? The cross. So, basically, what these kings are doing is they're going to conquer and convert. And in a lot of cases, if you didn't convert, that was a big problem. You either converted or you died in most cases. So, what this is doing is, this is giving the church a lot of power. The Pope is going to love this because he now has these kings that are conquering for him, basically. Because once they convert to Christianity, you only had Roman Catholicism in the West. Once they convert to Christianity, they are now under the influence of the Pope. That makes the Pope a very, very powerful person. So, from this point on, these kings become the unofficial protectors of the church. That's a big deal. This is a tradition that's going to continue. So basically, these kings are saying, church, I understand that you are more powerful, or you are the most supreme thing because God is the most supreme thing. This is going to give the Pope a lot of power. The popes a lot of power, and they will take advantage of that. So, eventually, the Carolingians take over. This is a new dynasty of Frankish rulers. The Carolingians were more closer to the German side of Europe, but these guys, again, big deal. All right, we begin with the Carolingians leader, Charles Martel, Charles the Hammer. That was his nickname. Maybe you can guess why he was called the Hammer. When he went into battle, he had his favorite weapon. It was basically a sledgehammer that he would use to smash in people's heads. Yep. So, Charles Martel, huge impact on Western Europe. In fact, those of you that consider yourselves Christians today, those of you that pray to Jesus Christ, more than likely, I'm willing to say that more than likely, you maybe would be praying to Allah if it wasn't for Charles Martel. Because he did something very important. In 732, he stopped a Muslim invasion at the Battle of Tours. Huge deal, the Battle of Tours. The Muslims kept moving more and more towards Western Europe. They wanted to get into Western Europe. They were already in Spain at this point, or Northern Africa, and they're trying to invade. And if Charles Martel had not stopped them, like I said, maybe Western Europe would have been praying to Allah instead of God. That's how big of a deal this guy was. That he was able to pull all his resources. I think he borrowed money from the church. He did a lot of stuff. He got a bunch of people involved, and he was able to stop the Muslims. So, big deal, Charles Martel. His son, Pepin the Short, which wasn't actually short. We believe this is a mistranslation, and maybe it was supposed to be Pepin the Young or Pepin the Little, something like that. But he continues in this tradition until Charlemagne takes over. Charlemagne's kind of a big deal. Very powerful Frankish king, Germanic king. Charlemagne is going to build the biggest empire since the Roman Empire in Western Europe. So we know how big the Roman Empire was in Western Europe. This is going to be as close as it's going to get under any king, and that was Charlemagne, or Charles the Great also. So Charlemagne, aka Charles the Great, aka Charles the First. You also may know that in the year 800, Charlemagne was given a pretty cool title, which we talked about in the last video, Holy Roman Emperor. Alright? Now there's a reason that the Pope liked this guy. This dude conquered a huge empire, and like I said, every time he conquered, he made sure that people converted. You either converted or you died. Right? So, and we have that here. Pope Leo III proclaimed Charlemagne Holy Roman Emperor in the year 800. And again, we talked about how that was going to be something that would mess things up with the Byzantines. You guys remember when the schism happened? 1054. So this is the beginning of a lot of that, right? Because the Byzantine Emperor, the Byzantines, who believe themselves to be the the survivors of Rome, are not being given that credit. Charlemagne, I already told you guys, big time Christian. Basically everything that you see, let me see if I can find it. Everything that you see in the orange here, including northern Spain right there, and out this way, all this was Charlemagne's empire. So it was a pretty big empire at the time. He controls Gaul, France, he controls Germany over here, and northern Italy. So he had a pretty big empire. You can see why there was so many Christians, so many people converted. Everywhere he went, he converted them, or he made sure that they converted, or that he killed them. Oh, there you go. This is his empire, but you see it's split into thirds because after Charlemagne dies, his sons are going to split the empire up between themselves because they couldn't agree on who should rule. And that's really going to weaken his empire, and you can understand why his empire fell apart. Now, during this time period, you know, like I said, huge empire, but it's not going to last very long. His son, Louis the Pious, which I'm sure all of you know what the word pious means. It means religious. Okay. Louis the Pious was not a really good ruler, and so when he died, his three sons, sorry, I misspoke earlier, his three sons, so Charlemagne's grandsons, divided the empire into three. And so that's going to weaken everything. Invasions are going to weaken everything, because not only did you have the Muslims trying to take over parts of Italy, you had the Vikings too. Right? You had Adrian Peterson right there trying to come in and steal everything. We already know Adrian Peterson. He'll whoop his kids, so he ain't afraid of stealing stuff from me. No, I'm just joking. So, very few people might actually know the reference of Adrian Peterson whooping his kids. I just realized that. So, the Vikings, we know where they're from, Scandinavia. Alright, Norway, Denmark, Sweden. Reputation for being savages, right? You guys use that word all the time now, right? Savage, whatever. But they also don't get a great reputation for being great explorers. Very few people actually talk about the fact that they were great explorers, and they were. These guys traveled all the way to North America, right? You all know about Leif Erikson and reaching North America. Anywhere there was water, these guys would go. They would try to explore as far as they could. But, when they would go places, they would raid, pillage, rape, everything. That's just how it was. That was their culture. Their culture was violent. When you look at Norse mythology, the beliefs that these Norsemen, these Vikings had, Valhalla, their heaven, sounds like a savage's dream. You basically spend all day fighting, and then at the end of the day you go into this huge banquet hall and eat all the food that you want and drink all the beer that you want, and then you wake up the next day and do it all over again. So it must be heaven, because they drink all that beer and they wake up with no hangovers, right? And they're able to fight all day. Not that you guys or I would know what a hangover feels like, but I hear they're pretty bad. So great explorers, but also savage people. One of the things that they loved to do was attack monasteries, because monks didn't fight back very well, and monasteries had a lot of rich things, so they loved doing that. They loved going in and taking from the monks in the monasteries. Eventually the Vikings are going to start to settle down and kind of adapt to the culture of the people that they were invading, and they become Christians too, and so that kind of goes away. But that's the role that the Vikings and the Muslims played during the Middle Ages, is just invasions. And so these invasions represent disruptions in the economy, disruptions in agriculture, because they screwed a lot of things up, right? So it's very hard to be stable when these guys are constantly invading. Now this kind of shows you the attacks. From the south you've got the Muslim attacks, from the north you've got the Viking attacks, and from over here you got the Magyars, so some of the Slavic people also attacking. Like I said, although Charlemagne was able to control a lot of land, eventually it all broke up, and this is when we're going to start to see, in the late 800s, the early 900s, things are going to start changing. We're going to start to see new regional states. We know what the word states means: countries, governments. We're going to start to see England. We're going to start to see France and northern Spain and Germany. All these are going to start kind of taking shape. So for example, in France, well no, let's start with England. King Alfred in England, he's going to start to create a state, be the lord, the main noble, the king, and he's going to have his aristocratic noblemen that are going to help him control things, right? That's feudalism. Same thing's going to be happening in France, and in Spain you did have, in the northern parts, you had some of the kings, some royalty that are going to establish their kingdoms, eventually trying to push out the Muslim caliphs. Remember that Spain is controlled by the Muslims by this point. So Spanish Christian states in the north warred against the Muslim caliphs. And that's, I mean, we're talking the kingdoms of like Castile. I told you guys about Castile, or I told some of the classes about the kingdom of Castile. You know, sounds like castle because that's where a lot of nobility was from. Nobility. Told you guys that's where my last name originates. Makes sense. So by the year 1000, this is what we're starting to see in Europe, right? We have the Holy Roman Empire, which is basically where Germany is going to be at, where Austria, North, Holland, all that. Over here, the Kingdom of Leon. There we go. Having a little trouble adjusting. There we go. The Kingdom of the Franks, the Kingdom of England, the Kingdom of Burgundy. That was a noble family. And I mean, you see, it's all. This isn't really all that, right? The Roman Empire. That's the Byzantine Empire. So you see how it's starting to take shape. It's starting to be regional kingdoms. That the whole feudalism thing. Again, that's what's happening. Oh, and looky here, the feudal system. All right, you guys should remember, the king controls all the land. He splits up that land into fiefs. All right, who controls the fief? The nobles, aka the vassals. All right. Vassals, nobles, same thing. What do the knights do? They protect the land. They fight for the vassals. They fight for the king whenever the king wants the vassals to bring their knights. And the serfs work the land. Now that's a new term for us in this chapter, the term serfs. We're going to see serfdom all over Western Europe. We're going to see serfs in Russia a lot. All right. What is a serf? We'll talk about that in a little bit, all right? But this is how it works, all right? Our lords, our vassals, our knights, our serfs. So, we already know. The lord controls all the land. The king controls everything. He gives land to his nobles. Trades land for service, all right? The land is called the fief, all right? And what are the vassals supposed to do? Provide defense. They're supposed to make the land productive, and they're supposed to owe loyalty, obedience, respect, counsel, military service to the king. Remember, it's I scratch your back, you scratch my back. I'm giving you power, noble, by giving you this land. You are helping me whenever I need you, the king says. So, that's feudalism. This is what was happening in Western Europe. Now again, we can't have feudalism work if you don't have loyalty. So these guys, these nobles, had to be loyal. But that's how it worked. That's what was happening in the West. Remember, in the East, what do they have? They have a bureaucracy. They have people that study to be part of that bureaucracy. These guys, it's just the kings and the aristocracy in charge of everything. This is a little bit about knights and the process of becoming a knight. Now, knights are considered nobility. They are considered the lowest the lowest class of nobility, but they are considered nobles. It's kind of like samurais. And I understand that you guys have a Venn diagram on samurais, on feudalism in Japan and in Europe. So that's one of the similarities. Samurais and knights were part of the nobility, the lowest class of nobility. So you had to be a noble, and then whenever you were about 7 years old, you got to be a page. Alright, and you got to go live in a castle, and they would teach you how to act, courtly manners, alright, courtly, as in how you act in a king's court. And then around the age of 14, you became a squire. Basically, the squire does everything the knight tells him, alright. The squire is the knight's little punk. He's going to do whatever the knight tells him. So taking care of the knight's horse, cleaning his all his stuff. He's at the knight's beck and call. Sucks to be the squire, I guess. But then around the age of 21, that's when you got your ceremony. Like you've seen in movies where they have it there's a priest there, and the king's there, and you get down on one knee, and they do the thing with the sword on both sides of your shoulders, and they say a prayer, and you're supposed to be like a knight after that. You've been knighted. And knights are supposed to serve a specific purpose. They're supposed to protect the weak, the defenseless. But what we started to see a whole lot in Western Europe as the knights became huge bullies. They were stealing from other people. And this totally goes against the knight's code, which is called the Code of Chivalry. I don't know if you guys have heard of the Code of Chivalry, or you've heard the word chivalry. A lot of times people say that chivalry is dead. But chivalry is the way that a man acts like a man, right? That's basically what chivalry is, and so these knights were not living by the code of chivalry, but nothing was really happening because everybody was doing it. Just like the Japanese samurai, they had a code called the Bushido Code, but they were way more strict about that. The samurai were they were legit. I'll take a samurai over a knight any day in any fight. So, this is kind of important. This is a big deal, and I'll finish up this part with manorialism. Alright, on your portfolio, I believe you're supposed to have a diagram of a manor. Alright? Manorialism is the process of producing and living in the manor. That's manorialism. It's explaining that, basically. Manorialism explains how things worked economically in Western Europe. In the East, tons of trade. Constantinople, Bosporus Strait. People making a whole bunch of stuff. People coming from all over to trade with the Byzantines. That's not happening over here. Everything survives on the manor. Okay? Now, we talked about serfs earlier, and you've heard the word serfs, but maybe you don't really know what they are. Serfs are the workers. They're the poorest of the poor. They are not slaves, because you cannot buy and sell a serf, but other than that, they're pretty much slaves. Serfs they're tied down to two things: their job and their land. And when I say their land, I'm not talking they own the land that they live on, the land that they work. For example, when a serf dies, the only thing that he's going to pass down to his children is his job and the land that they work. That's it. Serfs are stuck on that manor. Imagine that the north side, the neighborhood, the north side is a manor. Alright? You would be born in the north side, and you're going to die in the north side. And you will only know the people in the north side. You will never go to see people in south side. You're not going to go to Dallas. You're not going to go anywhere. You live and die on that manor. You work on that manor. Imagine that instead of a whole bunch of houses out there, we have little mud shanties, and everything else is farmland. You go out there and you work the farmland from sun up to sundown. That's all you do for your entire life. You don't own very much. The clothes on your back, the tools that you use are all borrowed. They belong to the nobles. You're just super poor. There's not much that you can do. The only reason that you have somewhere to live is because you work on that land. You cannot leave without permission. And like I said, that was it. That's your life. It was a very, very poor life. You're drinking beer to make yourself feel better because life sucks. That's all you got. So the manors, just to explain that, to wrap up this last couple of seconds on this 30 minutes. The manor is a self-sufficient place. It had to be self-sufficient. You know what the word self-sufficient means, or what that term means. They can survive on their own. The reason that the manor had to be self-sufficient is because leaving the manor is very dangerous. Thieves everywhere in Western Europe. It's not a safe place. The manor was safe because it's protected by the knights, by the noble. All right. So the manors is where everything's at. A church, a mill for the grains, you know, a water source, everything. The farmland, everything was there. All right. You didn't leave the manors. So some of you might have been asking yourself, why don't the serfs just leave? Because they have nowhere to go. They have no food outside of the manor. They're probably not going to survive outside of the manor. So this is important, right? The castle was on the manor, the church was on the manor, the mills was on the manor, everything was on the manor. You had to stay on the manor, and if you lived as a serf, it was a pretty sad lifestyle. All right, I'm going to stop this here, and then we'll continue on the next part.